I'm Lauren Hutton. Tonight on Intimate Portrait. She was, in a single word, Hollywood. The supreme illusion of glamour and sensuality, cast in a breathless pose, more mythic than real. She was Marilyn Monroe. In movies, photographs, and public appearances, she endeared herself to millions. Yet behind the platinum-dyed hair and painted red lips, behind the sexy pose and the dumb blonde act, was a simple, delicate woman named Norma Jean. For Norma Jean, the persona of Marilyn Monroe was an elaborate form of self-protection. Of all the characters she brought to life, 16 years of movies, film scripts, and starring roles, the greatest character she ever created was that of Marilyn Monroe. Despite the fact that she achieved so much public acceptance, she was forever confronted with personal rejection. She married 3 times, each one ending in divorce, and never achieved the cherished dream of motherhood. The world bid goodbye to Norma Jean when she was only 36, yet we continue to embrace the legend of Marilyn, immortal that she is, far beyond the grave.
The first impression you get, is shock that anybody should be so beautiful.
I think she was possibly one of the greatest photo subjects in the history of mankind.
She had that wonderful, magical quality, a great charisma on the screen, where she absolutely came alive on the screen. And it's such a gift, you know, you either have that or you don't.
There's nothing more adorable in the world than a beautiful clown. To have a beautiful woman that doesn't take herself too seriously, that can clown and tease and play, is a delightful thing.
She had power and she never knew it. And if you don't know you have power, you know, what good does it do you?
When we fell in love with Marilyn's inside, she'll be there forever.
Well, I think that there was something magic about Marilyn Monroe on the screen, but it went beyond that. The combination of sexuality and vulnerability. I think that she is one of the icons of the century, and she will be remembered.
The child who became the legendary Marilyn Monroe quietly entered the world in Los Angeles on Tuesday, June 1st, 1926. Her name, Norma Jean. She grew up near the heart of Hollywood in an age when movie stars and film sirens dominated the world through motion pictures. Stardom was every young girl's fleeting dream, but for Norma Jean, it was a fantasy she held on to from her earliest beginnings. Perhaps she was searching for love, looking to the big screen for a father she had never known, casting herself as the beloved daughter. She longed to be like any one of those film immortals, at home on Hollywood's boulevards, forever young, beautiful, and glamorous, to be larger than life and loved by all on the silver screen. This is where she believed she would find comfort and security, the place she could escape the harsh realities of the world around her. This was Norma Jean's most important dream, and the one she would cling to. Norma Jean's early years were far from those of a happy child. Those days instead were rife with abandonment. She was illegitimate, scarcely bonded to her mother, and disowned by her father. She had a yearning for love so deep, neither 3 marriages nor the adulation of millions could fill it.
She called her father, her real father, and his name was Stanley Gifford. And he refused to recognize her. And she didn't want anything. She just wanted, you know, say, yeah, okay, how are you, and so forth. And she was so sad that night. You know, she felt really rejected badly.
Norma Jean's mother was troubled. Gladys Baker came from a family with a history of mental illness. In time, Gladys was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia and confined to a mental institution. 7-year-old Norma Jean would spend the next 9 years being shuffled between orphanages and foster homes. At the age of 15, Norma Jean started dating Jim Doherty. He had been a student body president, a star athlete, and was very popular. She especially liked his accomplishments, the fact that he was 5 years older, and his sense of humor, all early indications of the qualities she favored in men.
She was very gentle and basically quite shy. She liked to ride horses. I thought, well, maybe I'll ask her out. So I taught her how to ride horseback. And I recall one time that it was late in the day, and Norma Jean was up in front, and I told her, I says, it's getting dark, turn your headlights on. You're the only one that's got headlights. And she says, where is it? I says, out front. I says, the switch is under the saddle horn. Near there somewhere. And she spent the rest of the trip into the stable looking for the switch to turn the lights on.
Hardship and destitution may have marked Norma Jean's earlier life, but as she was blessed with a spectacular beauty, she was always protected from the harshest circumstances. But that same beauty had a dark side.
Most girls were afraid that if she came by and their boyfriends saw them, they'd lose their boyfriends. So that was why she didn't have too many girlfriends, because she was beautiful.
Norma Jean was legally obligated to remain in a foster family or in an orphanage until she was 18. But the precocious young beauty found refuge in her high school sweetheart and became engaged to the aircraft factory worker.
Her foster mother came to Mom and she said that they were moving to Arlington, Virginia, and they couldn't take Norma Jean along. And she said, would you like to marry Norma Jean? I said, gee, she's pretty young. And she said, well, she's going to have to go back to an orphanage if you don't marry her.
They married on June 19th, 1942. Jimmy was 21. Norma Jean was barely 16.
I was in love with her personality, her sweetness, her generosity, her looks, the kindness that she had. She was very religious, and she had all of the qualities that I was looking for in a wife.
Though millions would come to know her as Marilyn Monroe, a sex symbol and blonde bombshell, the real Norma Jean was quite different.
She was a serious person, and she had a sensibility about her that would indicate that she was a vulnerable type person that someone could easily take advantage of because she trusted people.
Mrs. Jim Doherty settled into a happy marriage. At 18, she was a simple girl.
Norma Jean was very affectionate. She loved to hug. She liked to be kissed. She liked to be cuddled. That was very important to her.
2 years after their wedding, World War II took her husband away from her. Jim was ordered to the South Pacific. Once again, Norma Jean was alone.
The time came that I had to leave and go overseas. And I'm sure that, again, she felt the sense that she had been abandoned one more time.
While her husband was at war, Norma Jean worked on an assembly line building target planes. The year was 1944, and she was just one of many working women. But then, in a photo flash, her life changed forever. A photographer took her picture for a story on the war effort. Overnight, Norma Jean's poses were an instant sensation and landed her a modeling contract sowing the seeds of a budding new persona. Norma Jean's initial success prompted her to quit her job and take modeling lessons. She posed for ads, magazine covers, and calendars. She even began to think about acting and started taking drama lessons. She began to remember her childhood dreams.
While at the orphanage, from her room, from the cot that she slept on, there was a window in proximity to the cot. She could look out that window and she could see the water tower over the RKO studio nearby. And the irony is that one day Norma Jean would work at that studio.
Ever since childhood, Norma Jean had learned to create a dream world to buffer her from one heartache after another, and movies were a part of that escape. Now, after a photographer published her pictures, there was a chance to make a life in that dream world. But first, there would be a price to pay.
I had discussed it with her. I said, you know, this movie business is not going to work once I get home. You're going to have to make a decision. So she made the decision while I was gone, and I felt real bad. It hit me real hard. And then a few minutes later, I'm going to let her know I got that letter. I went and cut off her allotment. No more money. So when I got home, she says, "Here comes this letter, you cut off my allotment." I says, "Yeah, I just got a letter you're divorcing me."
Norma Jean had forsaken the certain love of her husband for a chance to be adored by millions.
She said that she had to have it. So we get straightened up, and we go out on the porch, and we're standing on the porch, and she says, "By the way, would you like to know what my new name's going to be?" And I said, "What?" She says, "Marilyn Monroe." I says, "How does that work?" Well, she said, "Marilyn was my grandmother's name, and Monroe was my mother's maiden name. So I'm Marilyn Monroe." I said, "Well, that seems nice."
A studio executive saw a screen test she made while modeling. The point was to emphasize her beauty and play down her acting inexperience. Therefore, it was silent. The studio chief was so impressed, she was given a contract on the spot. Fox paid her $75 a week and started a transformation that took the innocence and vulnerability of a once lonely little girl and turned it into a star and sex goddess. Norma Jean would now live forever in the shadow of her own creation, Marilyn Monroe.
This is the first car I ever owned. I call her Cynthia. She's going to have the best care a car ever had. Put Royal Triton in Cynthia's little tummy.
Right, lady.
Cynthia will just love that Royal Triton.
Marilyn Monroe was not born. She was created by Norma Jean Baker and a handful of Hollywood executives. At the core of the creation was a physical look and an attitude that fused a wounded child to a sultry yet vulnerable adult.
Certainly, when you look at the pictures of her as Norma Jean and then you look at her as Marilyn Monroe, it was an astounding difference. And there was a beauty about her as Norma Jean, this innocence and a freshness and a real country girl kind of feeling.
To movie executives, Marilyn was like a canvas upon which a masterpiece of beauty could be painted, and she was a willing participant.
She learned early on, as she manifested the character, that the audience was paying attention, that more and more letters were coming to Fox, that this was a PowerPoint, if you will. And she became the mastermind of this character. When Norma Jean went into the makeup room and did this whole thing, when she exited, you couldn't see Norma Jean anymore. You could see the invention, Marilyn Monroe. And that had great, great power.
Marilyn's image from the start captured the public's attention, but to her, it was a mask she created.
Marilyn was something that she wore, not who she was. And most people that knew her knew Norma Jean. Marilyn was put on to make money. It was a product that she sold.
Marilyn found a way to escape into a world of make-believe characters and scripted film circumstances. A difficult world to be certain, but one where she poured her desire to love and be loved.
The very reality of not having parents is probably one of the seedlings in her that made her want the love of the world.
While under contract at 20th Century Fox, most of Marilyn's work was as a hostess or model. Studio executives just didn't know what to do with the young blonde beauty and released her from her contract. But the competition was quick to sign Marilyn, and Columbia Pictures cast her in her first singing role in the musical Ladies of the Chorus.
Our flirty, flirty eyes will wink in your direction. We will throw you all a kiss that's filled with sweet affection.
Anyone can see I love you. Anyone can see I care. The way I hold your hand and smile in your direction tells the world my heart is filled with nothing but affection. Lock me in your arms.
But her career at Columbia came to a quick end. Studio executives were not satisfied with her progress as an actress, so Marilyn was dropped again by a studio. At the time, she thought she'd made her last film. Relying on her survival instincts that had taken her this far, she returned to her first love. The camera loved Marilyn, and Marilyn loved the freedom she felt in front of the lens. Like many beautiful models, Marilyn was often asked to pose without clothes, Many times she declined until she was offered $50 an hour, an enormous amount of money at the time. Needing to pay her rent, Marilyn agreed, but there were conditions.
Marilyn Monroe was on the way to an audition, and she'd been asked by many photographers to pose and had said no. And she was in a traffic accident, a minor traffic accident, and was suddenly stuck by the side of the road. And a photographer named Tom Kelly pulled over, and he gave her $5 for a taxi cab. Sometime later, it may have been a year or two, Kelly became one of the photographers that asked her to pose nude for a calendar. But he had been the one who had rescued her this day, and she had remembered that. And so she agreed to pose for him, and they shot this calendar pose.
In an era when posing for nude photographs could easily destroy a young actress's career, Marilyn played by her own rules. The pictures came out, and instead of denying their existence, she acknowledged them. The public, understanding the young woman's plight, embraced her honesty. Instead of hurting her career, the photos, several years later, launched an empire.
On a total investment of $8,000, and that picture of Marilyn Monroe, the Playboy empire was built. What I needed was something very special to get that attention because I didn't have the money for the publicity or promotion. I could not have rewritten history any better than to have the very first Playmate of the month, Marilyn Monroe, because she defines that innocence and sexuality.
Marilyn used her time in between movie contracts to hone her acting skills. In addition to classes, Marilyn studied the movies of glamorous stars that came before her.
She studied. She was very, very exacting in everything, in terms of studying the other actresses and what made the hair good, what made the makeup right, what made the walk, and all of those physical attributes. And she studied Betty Grable, Lana Turner, all of those glamorous women before her.
Her creation was beginning to pay off. She would soon be in the running for a major motion picture. It happened when she met and enchanted a very important Hollywood player. He was an agent named Johnny Hyde.
Hyde believed in her. Hyde was a millionaire. In fact, Hyde wanted to marry her. He suggested her to John Huston for the role of Angela in The Asphalt Jungle. To this period, she'd never made a film in which she had any significant momentum. Huston agreed to test her, and she gave a reading. And on completion of the reading, she asked Huston if she could do it again, and he said yes. He let her do it again, but he turned to Hyde and said, she's already got it.
The Asphalt Jungle became a turning point in her fledgling career. By 1950, Marilyn was on her way to becoming an enormous star. Her next movie was All About Eve, and like her last, she played an inexperienced young woman who was a protege of worldly older men.
After All About Eve, Fox signed her with a 7-year contract, and she did films like As Young as You Feel, Let's Make It Legal, Love Nest, just a whole slew of films. And then finally came the moment of Niagara. She was doing work of that quality that they simply could no longer deny her what she was earning. In other words, they were forced by a combination of fan mail and the reaction of the public and Marilyn's own work to finally deliver to her the stardom.
But she had that wonderful, magical quality, a great charisma on the screen, where she absolutely came alive on the screen. And that's such a gift, you know, you either have that or you don't. And she certainly did. And everybody that worked with her absolutely loved her. You know, they thought she was so wonderful, and she was.
Marilyn's mantle of stardom filled her life with people and excitement. She was admired and loved because she was beautiful. But with the adoration came a backlash.
She had power and she never knew it. And if you don't know you have power, you know, what good does it do you? And because I think people were really very cruel to Marilyn. They made fun of her when she walked down the street on the lot. People came out behind her and made an exaggerated walk and made fun of her. When you give off that sort of persona, you know, if I sat and I talked to you like that, you wouldn't exactly take me as seriously, would you? no matter what I said. And if you just look at what she says, if you put it on paper, she's very, very bright.
Marilyn's career was reaching its peak. At 27, 20th Century Fox promoted her as the blonde bombshell of the 1950s. She was made to appear sexy, shapely, and none too bright. Audiences were drawn to her comic naivete and physical beauty. So was one of the most famous athletes of the day. He was the legendary Yankee baseball player, Joe DiMaggio. Their love and marriage became an American myth.
I want to thank the editors of Photoplay magazine and all of the public. I thank you very much.
In 1953, Photoplay magazine voted Marilyn Monroe Best New Star of the Year. Of herself, Marilyn said, "The reason I got ahead was that I was lucky with the right men. Blonde hair and breasts, that's how I got started. I couldn't act. All I had was my blonde hair and a body men liked."
Marilyn became really the first sex symbol for America I mean, she wasn't trying really hard to be sexy, it was just there. And she seemed very sort of vulnerable and helpless, and you felt like you wanted to help her.
Marilyn was hot at the box office.
May I kiss your hand?
I always say a kiss on the hand feels very good, but a diamond tiara lasts forever.
We're just two little girls from Little Rock. We lived on the wrong side of the tracks.
But little rocks or square rocks, these gals must have their rocks. Diamonds are a girl's best friend.
Gentlemen Prefer Blondes was a smash hit and became one of her signature roles. That movie's success and her comedic skills earned her a coveted invitation to Grauman's Chinese Theater in Hollywood, fulfilling yet another childhood dream. From coast to coast, Marilyn drew crowds wherever she went. She stopped traffic in New York on the way to the theater. People couldn't resist the allure of the most beautiful goddess of the silver screen.
The doors opened and all you could see were about a dozen policemen crowded around and circled around this tousled blonde head. And the crowd went out of their minds. As she came close to where I was, I will never forget her head was sort of tossed back and tears were rolling down the sides of her face. And all I could see was Norma Jean and the victory. They love me. I'm accepted. I'm okay.
Marilyn's stardom provided a sense of safety and security she'd never known as a child. But her success bred conflicts and power struggles with the men who ran her professional life, the studio executives. She was too independent-minded for some of the men at the top.
When she arrived for the first day's shooting, Jane Russell had this wonderful dressing room, and Marilyn didn't have a dressing room. And Marilyn went into Zanuck's office and said, "Look, whatever else I am the blonde. It says gentlemen prefer blondes." She had to force them to give her a dressing room.
Success or not, her image as the dumb blonde was becoming a joke to critics and an obstacle to becoming a serious actress.
I think Marilyn was always an underdog. I think that the critics really ripped her to shreds. She was fighting a stigma that sort of got her to where she wanted to be, but it became a prison for her because people didn't want to see her as talented or as intelligent. And I think that happens for a lot of women.
Marilyn's career was hot, but her personal life was even hotter. Career objectives took a back seat when the world's most desired woman fell in love. The man in her life was the New York Yankees baseball star, Joe DiMaggio.
She didn't go after the typical Hollywood hunk kind of guy. That didn't interest her. She was really turned on by men of accomplishment.
Joe D. asked Marilyn to dinner. She expected him to be loud, sporty, dressed in flashy clothes, like a brash New Yorker. What she found instead was a quiet, shy man. All through dinner, he never took his eyes off her. Marilyn described Joe as having the grace and beauty of a Michelangelo. "He moves like a living statue," she said. "I'm sure I'm in love with him. I know I like him better than any man I ever met." After 2 years of dating, the beauty and the baseball star married. It was January 14th, 1954. Thousands of fans followed their every move. Their romance took the world by storm.
When a well-known honeymoon couple arrives at Tokyo airport, a throng of 4,000 baseball and movie fans surge out of control, break through police lines. Joe DiMaggio and his bride smile bravely at their greeters, but they don't dare move. So back into the plane they go, while police clear a path to the cargo hatch with DiMaggio's convertible. The stratagem works. The former Yankee slugger and his picture bride escape into the car and head for the safety of their hotel.
They honeymooned in Tokyo. Right after that, Marilyn toured for the USO in South Korea. She provoked near riots from the troops. Marilyn's reception from the GIs didn't resonate with her husband. After all, it was his new bride they were lusting after, and it only got worse. Joe didn't like the women she played in movies. Marilyn said he called them sluts, and he didn't like her clothes. Said they were too tight and attracted the wrong kind of attention. Show business isn't any business for a girl like you, he'd tell her. It looked as if their storybook marriage was ending before it had even begun.
Norma Jean was always searching. She wanted love and security and a father. She wanted this security of being married to an older person.
The final blow to their marriage came in what history recorded as one of the most famous movie scenes of all times, and one of the most legendary of all photographs.
The night they shot the skirt scene, as it's called, for the 7-year itch, out there shooting the scene on the street with 5,000 people watching, when her skirt rose and DiMaggio standing on the sidelines, her husband, was totally infuriated. And at the time when all the publicity allowed the fact that he was so angry watching this, I don't think it ever made any sense to anybody why he got so mad. But having been there and having watched myself, I understood his anger. And in fact, it's said they went back to the hotel that night and there was quite a fight.
Marilyn and Joe divorced within the year, on October 27, 1954. What good is being a sex star if it drives your man away, she asked. At divorce courts, mobs of people showed up. Are you still friends? Someone shouted. Yes, she said. But I still don't know anything about baseball. After the divorce, Marilyn left Hollywood. She had just finished making The 7-Year Itch in 1954 and was through with playing dumb blondes. She moved to New York to continue her studies as an actress with the famed teacher of method acting, Lee Strasberg. She was determined to be taken seriously as an actress.
Once she got recognition, which was the first thing she tried to get, then I think she wanted respect, which she never felt in her lifetime.
Marilyn was at a crossroads in her life. Her deepest hope was to reinvent herself as an actress.
She wanted to be an actress, and she felt that if she got older, possibly the acting ability would carry over where the dumb blonde dropped off.
Before she could reinvent herself as Marilyn, she had to come to terms with herself as Norma Jean. Although she was living her dream as a movie star, it wasn't enough. She felt something was missing, something that even the adoration of millions of fans around the world could not fulfill.
The best picture this year will also be the funniest.
Good night, sugar. Good night, honey. You stay here as long as you like. You're not giving yourself a chance. Don't fight it. Relax.
At the age of 28, Marilyn Monroe was a household name. Her photographs and blonde bombshell movie roles were etched into the American psyche. Ironically, her career was built on an image she created, but no longer enjoyed.
Marilyn hated only being that sexual woman. That was the act. It was wonderful. And that was the act she had hostility towards. She wanted to be more.
Marilyn desperately wanted to be seen as a serious actress. She vowed not to make another movie unless it was on her terms. And although it had been over a year since she'd made her last film, the crowds of fans in New York were a constant reminder of their loyalty. In 1956, she returned to Hollywood to star in the screen adaptation of Bus Stop, directed by Joshua Logan, a chance for Marilyn to shine as an actress. It was the story of a saloon singer bullied into a marriage which shatters her dreams of a career in Hollywood.
She'd gone to the actor's studio to learn how to use her real emotions. So, and not to represent things, but to actually experience things. And she showed that she could do it, and the results were there with Bus Stop and Some Like It Hot particularly. I think those were two of her best films.
Marilyn's character in Bus Stop brought to life an emotional depth and poignancy unlike any of her previous films. But the role she craved to play was the real-life part of a wife and mother. Marilyn once said hearing the words, "I love you," meant more to her than if 1,000 critics were to tell her she was a great actress. In 1956, she would hear those words and find love again with the acclaimed playwright, Arthur Miller.
She listened to him and watched him as if he was the only person in the world. And my husband said, "How could you not fall in love with someone who listens to you like that?"
Marilyn said of Arthur Miller that this was the first time she really felt in love. She said he was going to make her life different, better, a lot better. In July of 1956, the beauty wed the brain, and the couple seemed to be a perfect complement to one another. Arthur, she said, was the only brain who liked me for me. If I was nothing but a dumb blonde, he wouldn't have married me, would he? Her playwright husband fulfilled Marilyn's desire to be with a man of accomplishment, and she helped the outwardly taciturn playwright laugh.
I never knew him to be that free and loose and easy and enjoying of life as when he was with her, when the times were good with her, you know. She seemed to be able to just make him giddy. It was very charming and nice to be with him those times. He looked different. He just was like a man in love.
If having a husband was one wish, having a child was another. She had hoped that a child would satisfy her desire for unconditional love, something she'd been searching for all her life.
When I went into the service, she begged me to let her have a child. I told her that she was too young and it would be too much trouble. So we did away with the thought of having children until she was older.
She wanted children desperately. She was unfulfilled as a woman and a mother. I mean, if that's something that you want, that's a very sad thing not to have that.
Marilyn and Arthur nearly realized her treasured dream. She became pregnant twice, but sadly was unable to bring either one to term. For the woman who appeared to have so much in life, the fact was she had none of what she really wanted.
I visited her in the hospital, and I remember going into her room, and there was just a little nightlight on. Arthur was sitting in a chair next to her, holding her hand. She lost a baby boy.
Marilyn's failed pregnancies were the beginning of a downward spiral. She suffered increasingly from mental and emotional disturbances, marked by erratic behavior. Her marriage to Arthur Miller deteriorated and eventually broke down. In January 1961, at the age of 34, she divorced her third husband. Marilyn was as sad as any bride who saw a dream turn to dust. In the midst of their breakup, Arthur had written The Misfits for Marilyn. It would be the last movie she would ever complete. Some even blamed her when her co-star Clark Gable died of a heart attack after the movie wrapped. The rumors devastated her. Marilyn's grip on reality slipped, and she ended up hospitalized in a New York clinic for the mentally ill. For a woman who has had a family history of mental illness, it was a frightening episode.
Being locked up at Payne Whitney Psychiatric Clinic had to be so threatening because her mother had been institutionalized for most of her life. So when the doors were locked, that had to be a paramount moment to her.
In a desperate bid to find some semblance of sanity, Marilyn planned to take it easy. She would pace herself at work on her next film, Something's Gotta Give. But it was the one film Marilyn never finished. At the age of 36, Marilyn Monroe's world was falling apart. She was facing the end of the prime of her movie career. No longer would she be the hot young starlet. There were rumors of alcohol abuse, outbursts of temper, and constantly showing up late on the set. Ever insecure about her abilities, the studios with whom she battled were all set to let her know how easily she could be replaced.
In those days, you know, when you were starting to look at 30, you figured it was going to be over soon. You didn't last very long. And 30 was sort of the first nail in the coffin. And then there were maybe only 4 or 5 more nails, and that was it, 35, 36. So I was 19, so they were using that to threaten her.
1962 took on grand significance in Marilyn's life. She was recovering from her 3rd divorce, 2 miscarriages, and a nervous breakdown. Any one of those would shake up a more solid soul. For Marilyn, it was practically disabling. To escape, she turned to work. She buried herself in Something's Gotta Give. But first, she took time out from her 30th film to appear at a celebration of President Kennedy's birthday.
She comes into New York to sing Happy Birthday to the President of the United States. Goes to a rehearsal at Madison Square Garden. Returns from the rehearsal, and that night returns to the garden to sing, and Marilyn shimmered up onto the stage. Absolutely incredible looking.
She sang Happy Birthday. You know, that famous rendition of Happy Birthday to You at Madison Square Garden. Anyway, apparently she was given some tickets for the dinner and for the event and everything, and she invited my husband and me, and my dad was her date. And then afterwards, they went over to the presidential suite at the Waldorf, and she brought Dad along, and he stayed and met the president and met Bobby and met the vice president, Lyndon Johnson, and had a wonderful time.
Although she wowed the president and his crowd, she was not greeted with the same enthusiasm back on the set of her current movie project. She was summarily fired from Something's Gotta Give. The studio said her performance was unacceptable, though Marilyn fans and friends and critics who saw it later disagreed.
That footage has all this ravishing stuff of her swimming nude, and I think she would have probably made a great picture out of something she didn't even much want to do.
Marilyn Monroe never had a chance to make another movie. The woman who defined youth, glamour, and sensuality died sometime after midnight on August 5th, 1962. An autopsy revealed an overdose of sleeping pills ended Marilyn's life. The spectacular beauty who was the hallmark of an era would never have the chance to grow old. Instead, her death locked her in time while the rest of the world went on.
It's always a tragedy when someone dies in their 30s. It's also tragedy because she was a child, didn't get the kind of nurturing that all children deserve. She dealt with the world quite well, considering how the world dealt with her.
Marilyn's need for love went largely unfulfilled. Though she was a giant star and could have any man she wanted, neither her career nor her marriages brought her any enduring comfort or joy.
I think her life was very sad. I mean, she certainly had some terrific highs, but I don't know how rewarding they were for her. They came out of such struggle. I don't think it was, there was much happiness to all of her life.
Marilyn's business consumed Norma Jean's life.
I hate what it did to her, because it took this young, sweet person and destroyed her, totally destroyed her.
To those who really knew and loved her, Norma Jean's life had more despair than glory, more misfortune than luck.
She's not lucky, she died. The people that saw her were the lucky ones. The people that enjoyed her. The people that fantasized. She gave her life for it. Not worth that.
Marilyn will live on as an American legend. She is without question one of the most remarkable women of the 20th century.
Well, I think that there was something magic about Marilyn Monroe on the screen, but it went beyond that. The combination of sexuality and vulnerability was, I think, a part, in a very real sense, of her appeal.
Nobody quite has that same combination of beauty, voluptuousness, screen sexuality, and vulnerability that Marilyn had.
She could make you do anything in the world from that big screen. And she'll be there forever.
Though Norma Jean is buried, Marilyn Monroe lives on. Her platinum hair, red lips, and half-closed eyes strike a pose as classic as any great work of art. With every new generation, she is loved and appreciated, unlike any other star who has ever graced the silver screen.